During the course of both world wars, creativity had an important role to play. The significance of this creativity can be seen with the invention of the tanks discussed in this video. So top of the list is Tortuga. The Tortuga, Spanish for turtle, was an armored vehicle designed and built in Venezuela in 1934, during the rule of Juan Vicente Gomez. It was assembled at the Puerto Cabello shipyard by engineer Tomás Pacanins. First displayed at a military parade in the city of Maracay, the vehicle's existence was meant to send a clear message to neighboring Colombia, which had created several border and political incidents since its victory over Peru in the Leticia incident, as was the whole parade. On December 23, 1934, the Tortuga was first revealed to the public, in conjunction with two Italian Ansaldo CV-33 infantry tanks. Lieutenant Pedro Archero Amana describes the Tortuga. It was a very flashy armored car, whose external shell gave it a shape similar to a London policeman's hat. But it was hard to maneuver. With a nearly null ventilation system and nearly null visibility, its shell was mounted on a 6x4 Ford 1934 truck. Its rear wheels were linked by treads, making it a half-tracked vehicle, its designation within the Army being semi-treaded armored recon vehicle. It was armed with a Mark IV B7m machine gun installed in a dome-shaped rotating turret located on the upper part of the shell. Coming up next is Chrysler TV8. The Chrysler TV8 was a tank design project by Chrysler in the 1950s. The tank was intended to be a medium tank capable of land and amphibious warfare. However, the design was never produced. Using an unconventional tank design, the proposed tank located the entire crew, engine and ammunition storage within a pod-shaped turret mounted above a lightweight chassis which could be separated for air shipment. The Phase 1 design of the Chrysler TV8 featured a Chrysler V8 engine with 300 gross horsepower, which was coupled to an electric generator located within the rear turret. The generator powered two electric motors in the front hull, each motor driving either of the two 28 inches wide tracks. Propulsion in the water was by means of a water jet pump installed in the bottom rear of the turret. Other methods to power the tank were to use gas turbine engine drive, or a nuclear fission-powered vapor cycle power plant. The tank was armed with a 90mm T-208 smoothbore gun with a hydraulic ramming device mounted, and a .50 caliber machine gun on top of the turret were also included. Up next is Soviet experimental heavy tank developed at the end of 1959. This special-purpose tank was intended to fight on cross-country terrain, inaccessible to conventional tanks, acting as a heavy breakthrough tank. It was planned as a tank of the Supreme Command Reserve. The tank was developed at the Kirov plant in Leningrad by a group headed by the engineer L. Troyanov. It featured 4-track running gear mounted on two longitudinal, rectangular hollow beams, which were also used as fuel tanks. The tank's suspension was hydro-pneumatic with complex hydrotransformer and 3-speed planetary gearbox. The track adjuster was worm type. The tank was equipped with the powerful 1,000 horsepower 2DG8M diesel engine, enabling the 60 metric ton tank to attain 55 km/h speed, with active range of 300 km on one refuel. It also had auto firefighting systems, smoke-laying equipment, and a combat compartment heating and cooling system. The tank hull, with a maximum armor thickness of 269mm, was covered by a thin, elliptical shield protecting it against APDS and shaped charge ammunition. The turret ring was also heavily protected. The tank was equipped with chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protection. The tank was armed with the 130mm M65 rifled gun. The secondary armament was a 14.5 into 114mm KPVT coaxial machine gun with 800 rounds. Last on the list is Antonov 40. It was a Soviet attempt to allow a tank to glide onto a battlefield after being towed aloft by an airplane, to support airborne forces or partisans. A prototype was built and tested in 1942, but was found to be unworkable. Instead of loading light tanks onto gliders, as other nations had done, Soviet airborne forces had strapped T-27 tankettes underneath heavy bombers and landed them on airfields. In the 1930s, there were experimental efforts to parachute tanks or simply drop them into water. During the 1940 occupation of Bessarabia, light tanks may have been dropped from a few meters up by TB-3 bombers, which, as long as the gearbox was in neutral, would allow them to roll to a stop. Instead of building a glider, he added a detachable cradle to a T-60 light tank bearing large wood and fabric biplane wings and a twin tail. Antonov was more ambitious. Instead of building a glider, he added a detachable cradle to a T-60 light tank bearing large wood and fabric biplane wings and a twin tail. Such a tank could glide into the battlefield, drop its wings, and be ready to fight within minutes. The tank was lightened for air use by removing its armament, ammunition, and headlights, and leaving a very limited amount of fuel. Even with these modifications, the TB-3 bomber had to ditch the glider during its only flight, on September 2, 1942, to avoid crashing, due to the T-60's extreme drag. The F-40 was piloted by the famous Soviet experimental glider pilot Sergei Anikin. That's all for today. See you in another video.